Hello, this is Werewolf the podcast, and this is a continuation of the series for Joe Rogan, the eating and meeting and greeting of, well, maybe eating. I suppose we'll find out what happens in the end. There's loads of links down in the descriptors if you want to join the Facebook group and Twitter and all that kind of bollocks. It's up to you. But I'm just going to carry on with the story.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan podcast by night, all day.
It felt good to be back in wolf form as we charged through the undergrowth of the land around us. Fen and I were the perfect twin creature in flight. We were growling and snapping at the late night beasties that were annoying us by flying around our ears once we stopped. This was fun. I had arrived at my spot in front of the lodge a few hours ago. I mean, I had no way of knowing the time, so I assume it was a few hours ago. It felt like a fucking lifetime ago to me. I get bored easy, to be honest, and fun was happening in the lodge. Great smells were coming from it, and I could hear the people having fun. I was just ADHDing away, to be honest. It was difficult to stick to the plan, but then it happened. I saw the front door open and the guy swagger out. He sat on the veranda and took a swig from a can. This was a little unfair that I had to sit here in the fucking rain while he sat there just enjoying the evening. The fresh rain was not an issue for the wolf, but it was on and off all the fucking time. He'd get almost dry, then it would fucking pour down again. It was not like normal rain, it was like, I don't know, like God was having some kind of huge piss party on and off. And 100 yards away was a warm, cosy building serving very nice smelling food. And I could also sense the Lefroy single malt. So tempting. The man on the steps looked like a proper outdoorsman. In his right hand he held a can from which he drank. You could see that this man was seemingly cut from teak. A tough hombre, I'm sure. The door opened for a second time and another man came out onto the deck and hollered a greeting to the seated man. It was him. The Joe Rogan. Not Joe Rogan, but the Joe Rogan. They laughed together and the conversation turned to thought of the next day's hunting as they discussed the where, when, ifs and whats. Well, I could get this over with right now. I started to walk over to them from the opposite side of the track. It took a while for them to notice the wolf strutting over to them. I was slow and quiet and they were immersed in their own world. What was the threat to them at this moment in time? Nothing was coming near this lodge, was it? The other man took a huge drink from the tin. It was coffee. Coffee in a tin? And then he looked directly at me in the moment. Joe continued to chat, but the man who noticed me had completely switched off. As I got closer, I actually recognised him. It was that Cam guy, you know, Joe's friend, the one who runs for fun. Cameron just held the can to his lips and kept his eyes directly linked to mine. He wasn't scared. He was just weighing up the moment. He wasn't scared that an 8-foot tall black wolf was wandering towards them. He smelt unsure, but with no, real fear. Joe continued speaking, but Cameron slowly reached out his hand and touched him on the knee and nodded towards me. Joe quietened and turned his head. His eyes fell on the wolf. He raised the peak of his cap with a finger to take in the whole of me. This time I felt a shiver of fear, but it was controlled, and he seemed to have a simple interest in what would happen in the next few moments. I think he'd had a lot of trust in his friend. I mean, Cammy's supposed to be the expert in these things. I transformed before them, taking on my were form without breaking my stride. This caused a slightly different reaction, as you can well imagine. Cameron slowly got to his feet and uttered the less than worthy onomatopoeia. Whoa! I smiled, let them feel my rage verbally, and tore into the two of them. I shook my head just sitting there and stared at the personless veranda, and I knew I had to lie in the rain and wait for the following morning. I had a plan as how I wanted this to go down. I wanted to hunt the hunters themselves in the wild and make the people realise that the natural world, even the slightly super unnatural world, can kick your ass. I trotted behind them the following morning as an ATV took them out to the drop-off point and they set off into the mountains. This was so super exciting. There was just the two of them. This was going to be the best thing ever. They walked into the hills for a couple of hours and I followed them closely. Well, I followed them close enough for me to keep an eye on them. The hills were full of the sounds of horny bulls. Have you ever heard a horny elk? The sound is, well, it is super unnatural, to be honest. People call it a bugle, and it does sound like a very poorly played bugle. After being dropped off, I followed them for a couple of hours as they made their way into the mountains. The two hunters now sat in a stand a little higher than the open area where a big buck sat. He was a big old motherfucker, and his prongs were large and spread wide. I guess he's weighed at about 1,000 pounds, so hefty. Not a record breaker, but he was acting like one. He was screaming at his bitches and not letting them wander off. I was sitting naked in the bushes, with the annoying fucking flies in a cloud around me. They were seated at some distance with rangefinders and binoculars, watching the stag. They were going to take this one. I watched them in my human form with my posit. I could close my eyes and be inside my wolf soul, as he followed them invisibly. They were getting themselves in range for their strike, and it was time to make that strike for them. I brought Fen back into my body and formed the wolf. I stalked the beast through the low-growing vegetation. I was on my own and would have to get to it and bring it down cleanly and quickly. If I spooked him, he might get away, and I couldn't let that happen. I had to ravage him and kill him almost instantly, so that the guys got no time to prepare and loose an arrow shot. I sneaked forward on my belly until I was in distance for a quick sprint. I waited for a moment before I would make my run. It was a bit unfair hunting these creatures at this time of the year because of their single-mindedness for fucking. They're not really paying that much attention to danger, just the need to copulate. I tore into the beast at high speed, knowing that the hunters were watching the big buck only 50 yards away. He didn't see me coming and had no time to react to me as I tore out of the bushes and seized the creature by the throat. I brought it to the ground in one sweeping movement. As I grabbed it, it turned and screamed its disapproval at my attack. As soon as I had hit the creature, I knew that I had torn through its carotid arteries. I could feel the blood pour in and around my mouth. Its warmth ran onto my tongue. It did not realise that it was dead yet, but I knew it. I could taste the life leaving the creature as its blood ran down my throat. It felt great. Somehow the beast managed to regain its feet as it staggered and fought for its life against my onslaught. I was a little shocked that it had managed to get up, but it had. I circled it now, and the beast, as though drunk, tried to keep its rack between myself and it. It was failing now. Blood was no longer pouring from the gouge down the side of the creature's neck. As it fell to its knees, I wandered over and wrenched it to the floor once more, then tore out its throat properly. It lay on its side now and slowly jerked until death took it. Jesus, the testosterone in these things keep them going until the end. I wish I could have seen the reaction of the hunters to this one-sided battle, firstly because there are no wolves in Utah. So the fact that they'd just seen a wolf take down a bull elk would have been somewhat of a shock. Secondly, that I was so fucking huge. I was massive and out there. It must have been somewhat of a moment. When the stag was dead, I raised my head and hackles and came to my full height. I am some 8 feet tall from front foot to the tip of my ears. I looked directly at the sight that they currently held. I knew I was in range. I also knew that they really could not hurt me with fucking bows and arrows. To finalise the dramatic piece, I dragged the 1,000-pound beast into the bushes very quickly and was out of their sight. At this point, you have to ask yourself what is more worrying than the sight of a giant fuck-off wolf a few yards away. The answer to that is when a giant fuck-off wolf suddenly disappears into the landscape and you have no idea where it is. Sadly, I have to say, they didn't seem to panic or freak out. They were super calm after seeing my destruction of a fully grown buck by a creature like me. They knew what they were doing to hunt the buck. They were downwind of me, so I couldn't smell them, but I could hear them. They were scared and excited in equal measures and started to move quietly from the problem. This was super impressive. They weren't running. They were walking with a careful, quiet purpose. I could hear the movement of the vegetation as they went, but that was the only thing I could hear. I genuinely could not see them. They had obviously dropped the orange twat hats that they were wearing. It must be so that other hunters do not confuse them for trees and bushes. It seems weird to be in full camo with a bright orange hat on though. I moved at the same rate as the pair of them. I hunted head down, sniffing the ground and slowly taking the weight on huge paws almost soundlessly. The problem with me stalking through the bush is that I'm a bit big, so I have to push my way through the stuff, and that sadly makes some noise. I slowly closed the distance between myself and them. The annoying thing was that these guys were good, and I couldn't still see them. That was very strange. I mean, I'd been taught by special forces how to do this shit, and they were doing better than me at this point. I got to the spot that they had been when they'd watched me take down the buck. They had done something at the site in one heck of a rush. They had removed a lot of their kit and placed it high in a tree. It was clever, and I appreciated their work in hiding stuff, but I found it. I reached up and removed it and inhaled the scent deeply. The smells were very telling. A little sweat, a little fly repellent. It would now be easy to track them as I could smell and then freely follow them. They thought that I was a stupid wild animal with only an animal's feral cunning to do the work of finding them. That really wasn't the case. They were trying to outwit me, and they were going against me. They could not outwit me. I started again on the trail. They were being a little too careful and had lost their way as they progressed through the woods. They had veered so far from the line that they wished to follow that they were almost heading back to the spot where I had initially seen them. Then it came. My own ego had trapped me. They had managed to loop around and take a stand by a large group of trees, giving a superb open view of the spot where I was standing. They were not now hunting deer, but hunting wolf. The cheeky fuckers. I heard a short whistle and then something thud into my hindquarters with a bloom of pain. I span to find the place where the arrow was fired from. They had set this up. I opened my chest to them as I turned, and another shot buried itself in my throat. The pain was intense, and a quick lesson in not underestimating these creatures. They had concluded that they could not escape me, but if they managed to land arrows in my hide, I may slow down. The first shot had been perfectly timed. It would have been a perfect lunge shot if I had not reacted to the whistle and turned. If I'd been a normal wolf, it would not have been long before I had fallen. The second shot was perfectly timed and a challenging target. They had not relied on the lung shot. They knew better and hit me with the next arrow in the throat. It was a hell of a shot if they had been aiming at that part of me as a target. I couldn't move right. My hind leg would not work properly, as the muscle that the arrow was sunk in was unable to work around the tip and shaft of the arrow. My throat was pierced and I saw my blood lance from the wound. They'd hit an artery, and I might fail quickly with blood loss. I would have to remove the shaft and the head before I could heal the wound. Who knew that arrows would be particularly good weapons against werewolves? I dropped and crawled my way into a scree of scrub. Another arrow buried itself in my rump, and yet another missed by a few inches. What the fuck was happening here? I shouldn't be in this much trouble, should I? They were fucking arrows. Fen sat in the back of my mind and brought me back into the here and now. He had to do so to deal with my injuries. Be ready, flashed in my mind. We changed back to human. My posit now sat over my prone body for a moment before telling me what to do next. We need to take those two out of your ass first. They should heal pretty quick. The one in your neck is a little more worrisome. We need to take that out quickly and put pressure on it while it heals, otherwise you're going to pass out and those dicks will escape. They're not coming to check on their kill. They are not that stupid and are now getting out of here as fast as their little fat human legs can carry them. If they get away, you will have millions of people listen to the moment when they humiliated you on his fucking podcast. You want that? I did what he said, sitting up and spitting blood. I grabbed at the blood-slicked arrow shafts. They were made of a metal material I didn't really recognise, so they were super slippy, and it took a few good yanks to remove the first one from my thigh. I felt light-headed as I grabbed the other arrow. Blood pissed out all over the ground. Not yet, Will. Let that wound heal before we get the other fucker out. The one into the throat is already being pushed out, so it will be easier to leave it a little longer before we remove it wholly. You're a mess, mate. I roared a pretty guttural human roar, even for a human. These men were now going to get the result of this attack. They were now going to get an entirely switched on killer. There would be no more underestimating these creatures. Now, Will, take out the other shaft. I pulled on the shaft. It was too slick to move. It was polished, super strong and super flexible. I couldn't remove it. What the fuck was going on? Was I floored by a fucking arrow? I had once taken a shot from an M82 50 caliber in the hip that had smashed me into pieces. I'd rebuilt and been okay from that, but the body could easily fix itself. It could rebuild because there was fuck all getting in the way of its healing. Bullets just got pushed out. But this wasn't happening with these fucking arrows. They were stuck in there like a leech up a hippo's ass. Fen, I can't get it out. I can't get a grip on the fucking thing. Was brought into my head. Well, the only option then, Will, is to push it through the muscle and out the other side. You are obviously fucking kidding me. That means I have to push it through the thickest part of my leg. I kind of wasn't happy with this, and my poor posit, well, he was only trying to help me. There was a silence. Then he started laughing, which made me start to laugh in turn. Okay. I slammed my hand down on the knock of the shaft. The arrow tore through the leg and out the other side. Oh my goodness, that stung. Well, it stung like fuck. Well, stinging like fuck was a bit of an understatement. It hurt a lot. There are not the right words to explain in the English language, really, how much it hurt. I now sat watching the wound slowly heal. Thank fuck for my supernatural magic healing bollocks. The one in my throat was next. How was I going to get this one out and not pass out and waste a lot of valuable time? I had to get these bastards before they managed to get themselves to some kind of safety. Otherwise I would have to do some frontal assault on the lodge before they left. And who knows what kind of firepower they may have in there. I mean, I had just been humbled by medieval technology. Well, I suppose the modern version of medieval technology. Maybe they would kill me with pea shooters and beat me to death with down pillows. I grabbed the shaft of the throated arrow with both hands and pulled as hard as I could. The arrow shaft bent as my hands crushed it and it slipped from my grip. Ah! More blood spewed into the night from the wound. I now really did feel dizzy, and I don't think my body was making blood at the same rate that it was leaving. I had to get this fucking thing out. Again, I punched it through the neck. It came out the other side by my spine, and I had to draw it out slowly so that it did not slip from my grasp. I was sitting in a huge puddle of blood and feeling myself drop in and out of consciousness. Once the arrow was out, I felt Fen enter my body and transform us to aid my recovery. Then there was blackness. I woke a few minutes later. The arrowhead was on the floor and looked like some kind of medieval torture device. It was a broad head, but about halfway down there was another blade. Well, not blade, just a piece of triangular metal at 180 degrees from the front. They looked like a cross, sharp at the tip, wide and dull at the back of the head. No wonder I couldn't pull this thing out. I tell you what, you werewolf hunters, get these things on your list of weapons to disable a werewolf, because these hunting tips and shafts just did that. I could not have been out for long because the blood I lay in had only just started to thicken. I rose as my wolf and shook myself to try and clear my sight and my thought. Then I did what I knew would create the most fear in these running men. I roared the loudest and most grating rage-filled roar into the night. This would hit those parts of the monkey's prey strands of DNA and cause the ultimate fear in the cunts. I fucking hoped. Now I turned and followed. I ran into the night on the scent and did not care about the noise I created. I focused on my environment. There would be no more chances of traps. I was now the hunter, and I would be doing the trapping. Thanks for listening. You can support the show by buying me a coffee. There's a link in the description. Love you very much. You're all wonderful people. Bye.